And now we are moving to the first panel on integration of energy and transport sectors. When you organize a conference for people in tender age, as we are, you can always have unpredicted situations. And yesterday, I was called by Henrik Lund that he was taken to hospital. And he is okay, fortunately, but he's not able to come. Since I have heard his lecture for 10 times, I will try to introduce his lecture. I have his presentation, so I hope it will work. But where is the presentation? Okay, it's here. Good. Then we will continue with the panel. Henrik Lund is from Aalborg University, Denmark, and he has started to work on this integrative approach to energy planning long time ago. The first time I saw him in 2002, we clicked immediately because we had very similar conclusions that integration is the must. He is from the part of Denmark, Jutland, which is 50% based on wind energy and has a very high share of offshore power, and 30 to 50% of electricity supplied by CHP. So it's already mostly renewable. Around 30% of gas is actually biogas. What has to be done by 2050 is fully decarbonize all sectors. Is it going to be 100% renewable energy system, or it's going to be climate neutral? We decided for climate neutral, so we can still have a little bit of fossil fuels in 2050 because part of the emissions will be balanced with negative emissions in forestry and agriculture. But anyway, that means that transport will have to be mostly decarbonized. And there have been many reports and strategies in Danish history how to do it. And basically you need a new strategy every few years because you need to persuade the new government to continue with the good work. We also in Croatia do a new energy strategy that nobody follows every few years, but they are getting in time better and better. We are slowly moving towards understanding that the future is fully renewable. In order to do that, you need to have a good energy system analysis model, which Henrik has developed 25 years ago. Energy plan is, for example, a good one to understand what goes where. All these fancy optimizing energy planning systems are hiding technologies that will actually be of huge help. Especially if you calculate only power system, you will not see the future, you will only see the problems. So you need to do a holistic approach. You have to model everything all the time in very fine hourly time steps. So power, heating, cooling, transport, biogas, feedstocks for industry altogether. And for that you need to have very developed energy system analysis model that can model all these subsystems. An important outcome of this modeling is that storage is going to be important, but electricity storage is very expensive. And we are going to have very little electricity storage. That's why we need to integrate different sectors, because if we store heat as heat and not as electricity, It is much cheaper. If we store gas and not as electricity, it's even cheaper. So we should actually store final fuel that we are going to use. We could sometimes use these fuels back as a backup, but that will not be necessary that much. So if we look at historic storages, the biggest one in Denmark is oil storage, a huge amount, and then gas storage, and thermal storage is very small. And then if we look at electricity storage, is extremely small. And most probably we are going to stay with relatively small electricity storage. So we have to balance our power system with the other systems, with the heating system and the transport system, where in order to be able to integrate wind and solar. And also the grids are much bigger on the gas side and heating side than electricity side. Yes, we can use grid as storage partially, but when we need heat, we should store energy in heat. Are we going to use hydrogen or electricity in transport? It's quite obvious that electricity is much more efficient. So we will be using quite a lot of electricity because we have we will have batteries which will be paid from the transport system. That means that storage will not be very costly to the power system. But a crucial thing is we will have to devise such fiscal measures or tariffs in order to make this possible. And as I said before, coupling the wholesale market with retail price will do the miracles for integration. Hydrogen can serve as a good storage, but it's less efficient, so we should use it only when electricity cannot deliver the service. The energy planning shows that Denmark can reduce emissions by 50% by 2030. What does it mean in European context? One thing that we should also include is international aviation and shipping, because that's a significant amount of fuels. And we also have to decarbonize those fuels. We will have to produce them from renewable fuels or renewable electricity or from biomass. And we should not use more biomass than it's sustainable in order to avoid breaching the unsustainability. Denmark should also make their contribution in terms of flexibility and reserve capacity to integrate wind and solar into the European electricity supply. Denmark is a difficult country to decarbonize because they don't have hydro. Croatia is a very easy place, but we don't have political will. So which way is easier, we'll see. It looks like technical difficulty, if you have political will, is much easier than lack of political will. By 2045, Denmark will be feasibly completely decarbonized, all sectors. Practically all transport will be decarbonized. How will it look like in this chart? We can see wind, the most important source of energy, of primary energy in Denmark, and quite a lot of biomass, very little solar, because, well, Denmark is a bit to the north. And then we have direct use of electricity as much as possible, and some of this electricity will be used to produce hydrogen, and then hydrogen will be used to improve the bio-based sources in order to produce fuels and industrial feedstocks for for the production of other things. And if we look at the biomass, where the biomass will be ending, we can see that quite a lot of this biomass will be also using hydrogen. We will have a bio-E sector, bio-E refineries in order to produce fuels for and feedstocks for industry and for heavy long-distance transport. So that will mean a significant increase of solar and wind for electricity production. Solar will grow 10 times since 2020 and offshore wind for 7 times. That will lead to the significant increase of electricity demand in Denmark, but most of this additional electricity will be used for power to heat, the orange one, which is already used partially, and then power to transport. We see that there is around 40% growth of electricity demand in the transport sector, and then power to X for heavy transport and for industry for production of hydrogen and hydrogen-based fuels. So more than doubling of primary electricity production. If we look at an energy system and then see what happens when we increase the wind share of electricity in the power system, then we also see the growth of critical excess of electricity production, which means electricity that has to be curtailed. It cannot be integrated. Once this electricity reaches around 5% of curtailment of total electricity, it stops being viable to continue increasing the share of variable renewables, or wind in this case. So that means we can integrate easily up to 20% wind. To go above that, we need power to heat. This is what Denmark is already doing. Remember that Denmark already has 50% wind. So they already do quite a lot of power to heat. With power to heat, we can double that integration of wind. With power to transport, we can double it once again, and we basically reach 80% of penetration of wind only. So you can add then here some solar and other sources, hydro in Croatia, and you have no problem. The rest will have to be then solved through bio-e-fuels in order to reach 100%. Then people talk a lot about Dunkelflaute or winter windless weeks. It doesn't really happen. On European level, it didn't happen for the last 5 years. If we build enough excess wind in the power system, as in this case, the blue line is so-called non-flexible demand or legacy electricity demand, what we previously used, and we build more wind, maybe around 3 times more wind than we actually need to cover this demand. We actually, in a small country like Denmark, satisfy all the demands apart from 7% of the cases. So for 7% of the cases, Denmark will need support from either network, so the grid from Norway can do this support, or they will need some kind of backup from hydrogen or biomass or some other source of energy. But if we look on the European level, actually we don't need that much. It's always enough wind somewhere in Europe. The question is, are we going to build enough grid to balance North Sea with Mediterranean wind, or are we building local solutions with demand response? It's generally more secure and cheaper to do more demand response locally and to build the grid only up to a level. Because if we are going to depend from countries which are too far, that is probably not the best solution, but it can be done. So most of ours, around 80 to 85% of ours, wind and PV will exceed the non-flexible demand. In some hours, there will be lack of some production from those variable renewables, but this is Danish case. In such hours, of course, imports or production from backup turbines may be required. And what about the grid stabilization issue? Well, we can use the thermal units, which we will need as a backup for a long time, as a way how to produce inertia by idling the generators on the grid. Once we will not need any more those thermal units, then we will have to produce inertia with power electronics. The technology exists, so it's not an issue. We will be able to have stable grids even without thermal units. In order to conclude, electricity balancing and grid stabilization of the power grid is an essential challenge. In future, fully decarbonized societies, electricity demands will increase 2 to 3 times. More importantly, it will change its nature. New coming flexible demands from car charging or power to heat or production of hydrogen, that will solve most of the problem of this excess. As a consequence, the future renewable energy systems will be able to cover almost all the non-flexible demand directly from wind and solar without any electricity storage. In smart energy systems approach, flexible demands will be stored in other and more affordable storages, such as thermal, gas, and liquid fuel storages. Traditional grid stabilization from power stations can be replaced by flexible demands, so electrolyzers, electric boilers, and the like, heat pumps in most hours. You can have reserves provided to the power system by electric boilers or heat pumps. With this, I would like to end the Henrik's lecture. I hope I did manage to give the main message. He is a great speaker, so it was not as good as if he was here. I will not answer his questions, but we will have a panel to ask the questions. So I would like to invite now the panelists to step forward. We have Katrin and Jiri and Herwe and Ulrich. Please. Maybe leave this chair to me and take the chairs. Okay. So we will organize it in a way to have first initial pitch from each of the panelists. And we can start from Katrin? Okay. And then we will have discussion, and then we will have open questions. So please. Okay. Okay.
Zdravo, or as we'd say in Australia, g'day. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this panel, and I'm disappointed I didn't hear Henry's own presentation, but boy, you did a good job. I was so impressed. It's so hard to give somebody else's presentation. To give you a bit of background about Australia and where we stand in terms of where we're up to in electrification of our transport system. In 2022, Australia's transport sector made up nearly 20% of our carbon emissions. So it's a big chunk of our carbon emissions. And of these transport emissions, 60% were from passenger cars and light commercial vehicles. Despite the sharp decline during the pandemic, it's back on an upward trend again, and a rapid one at that. Do I have is that my first slide?
You have to activate.
Mm-hmm.
Can you help activate this slide?
Just page up, page down?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We all know that there's a clear imperative to accelerate the decarbonisation of the transport sector through the uptake of electric vehicles, amongst other things, though, as we also heard earlier, the commercial transport sector is also a really important part of this. But at the moment, I'm just going to focus on the private transport sector. In Australia, various EV targets have been established across our states. We're a federated system in Australia, and most states are aiming for something of the order of 50% of new car sales to be electric vehicles by 2030. While the global momentum is driving the transition, one has to admit Australia is far behind European nations. In part, it's because we've never had the same strict fuel emissions conditions and regulations that you've had across Europe, and that has led to be frank, us getting kind of whatever anyone's got left over in terms of their vehicles. So we're coming off a very, very poor situation. The number of electric vehicles in Australia has doubled in the last 12 months off a very low base. It was 3.8% in 2022, and in February this year it rose to 6.8%, but it's still a very poor situation compared to many European countries in particular. It's clear we need EVs and other zero-emission vehicles to decarbonise the transport sector. However, we acknowledge that without complementary policies and initiatives, the lower operating costs of EVs might result in adverse economic, social and environmental outcomes, and undo years of transport and land use policies aimed at reducing private vehicle mode share. These potential consequences result from the significantly lower vehicle operating costs of EVs compared to ICE vehicles, and include things like a mode shift from public transport back to private transport in EVs, leading to an increase in trip lengths, road congestion, increase in the per kilometre emissions from the ICE remaining vehicles due to the increased road congestion they'll be confronting, and in Australia's case, increased urban sprawl as the lower per kilometre travel costs encourage people to live further out. Further to this, as acknowledged by the keynote, we need to be cognizant of the potential implications for energy grids as well. As the numbers grow, an increase in electricity demand for charging is inevitable. Careful planning is needed to manage this growth at a time when concerns have been raised about the grid's capacity to meet the demand for electricity. Early findings from the University of Queensland on the use and charging of electric vehicles suggest they'll have probably a more limited impact during peak demand than some might have feared. But ultimately, they could even improve grid stability with batteries on wheels, if you like, feeding in electricity at times of need. However, Australia still has a long way to go in V2X, whether it's vehicle to grid, vehicle to home, and so forth. There's really somewhere close to zero options at the moment in Australian vehicles that are available, and our processes and our regulations for handling that. The impact on the grid depends on the number of electric vehicles, how much and when they're driven and charged. So again, we're now coming into more social implications because we're talking about behaviour. Initial research reveals electric car users are oops, I'm out of my time, but I'm going to keep going. Consciously or not, mostly charging them in ways that don't stress the grid. As the number of these vehicles grow, encouraging a higher proportion of charging events outside peak hours will be beneficial. Proper management of charging could better help integrate renewable electricity sources within the grid, save millions of dollars in grid investment, and open up low-cost charging opportunities for electric vehicle users. So it's mostly about behaviour change. In Australia, almost 1/3 of homes have installed solar panels, and I'd like to acknowledge here 2 ATSE fellows who will be on Thursday receiving the Queen Elizabeth Prize for Engineering for their development, or invention and development of the PERC cells that something like 90% of all new installed solar panels use. So it's been a real success story in recent years with a huge uptake in Australia. By 2050, 2/3 of homes are expected to have rooftop solar. And as the number of electric vehicles and the share of renewable energy increases, incentives to encourage users of these vehicles to charge during specific hours of the day will be beneficial. So the transition to EVs will occur over the coming decades. We need to consider complementary policy levers that required to, to ensure that the benefits of EVs are maximised and that EVs contribute to achieving sustainable, productive and vibrant cities. Along with the issues I've raised in relation to the growing demand for electricity, it's essential that we encourage governments and the wider transport planning and management community to actively consider policies and initiatives, such as continuing to invest in decarbonised public transport. In Australia, again, our public transport is probably not as good as in many parts of Europe, and as our cities go out further and further in our urban sprawl, public transport does not keep up with it, and that's a really important policy area that we need to improve on. So urban planning is incredibly important at that stage. We need to develop and institute policy measures to manage private vehicle demand, road pricing, parking policies, congestion taxes, and so forth. And we need to consider the spatial implications of these initiatives in terms of not encouraging uptake of people to move further and further out. Also, because what that means is that it's a socio-economic issue. The ones living further out in Australian cities are, by their very nature, less well off, actually less able to take up EVs, so we end up with this sort of dichotomy. So that's a picture from Australia, a lot of problems, but we really need to think about the social implications, the social science implications, and how we actually drive behaviour, as well as the policy implications of making it easier for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. So we see that Australia is not much better than Croatia in numbers, which is making my life a little bit easier, but I'm sure that Yuri will show us that Belgium is much more advanced. Let's see.
Let's see. Good afternoon. My name is Yuri van Mierlo. I'm professor at the university in Brussels, where I'm leading the MOBI Research Center. And in fact, in Brussels, we started our research on electromobility end of the 70s. This was the fleet of our electric vehicles. We even tried to drive from Brussels to Paris with lead-acid batteries. In the meantime, the research center MOBI has grown. We are now with 120 experts in the field of e-mobility, covering battery technology, power electronics, charging infrastructure, life cycle assessments, consumer behavior, and so on. So the whole picture of e-mobility. And 10 years ago, we did already a survey towards consumer behavior. And out of that survey, we noticed that there are 3 main barriers for the introduction of electric vehicles. 3 barriers in any country in the world, we see the same barriers. That is the purchase price, the driving range, and the third one is availability of charging infrastructure. And luckily, in many countries, we see an improvement in this field. But we see in the development countries that these barriers are still there, that there is still some work to be done. Improvement in driving range can be easily seen in this picture because the battery technology has evolved significantly. Our fleet of the 70s had lead-acid batteries. We could drive around 30-35 kilometers, and then we had to recharge. Our fleet of electric vehicles we had in the 90s were equipped with nickel-cadmium batteries, and we could drive 70 kilometers. Okay, we did a test from Brussels to Monaco at that time. And then luckily the invention of the lithium battery was there, and that was really the breakthrough in driving range of electric vehicles. And lithium, for me, it's a family name. There exists many different chemistry in the family of lithium batteries, and this allows us to further improve the amount of energy that can be stored per weight and volume in these batteries. And hopefully we will have battery technologies driving 800 kilometers in the near future. Next to the driving range, the cost went down of the battery technology. The last 10 years with a factor 10, so 10 times more cheaper. That's nice. And this cost reduction has mainly translated into the driving range of the battery, not yet into the cost of the vehicle. As can be seen in this picture, in this figure, you see horizontally the driving range of electric vehicles and vertically the purchase price. And you see here a cloud of vehicles that were on the market in 2015. Currently today we see a shift of these, now indicated in red, of these vehicles available on the market. So there are many things that we can learn. We can learn that we have much more choices to buy an electric vehicle, which is important from a consumer point of view, and that the driving range is extended towards the right. And hopefully in the future it will go down more to the bottom of this picture, high driving range for low-cost vehicles. Then have a look at the charging infrastructure, which was the third barrier for market introduction of electric vehicles. Well, it has already been introduced in the previous presentations, but if we do it in a non-smart way, so we just come in the evening at home and everybody plugs in his electric car, then at that time, you see it in blue, there will be a peak demand for electricity. But that's not needed. When I come home, I just want to charge my vehicle, and I want my vehicle to be charged, fully charged, the next morning when I drive back to work. So I have the whole night to charge my vehicle, and that is what we call smart charging. But we can go a step further, and often it is said that electric vehicles will have an important impact on the electricity distribution grid. Well, my point of view is that electric vehicles are a distribution grid on wheels. When I'm working at my university in Brussels and there are solar panels on the roof of the university, during the day I charge the battery of my electric car. I drive home after my work, and in the evening I bring that electricity back to my home. I start cooking, watching television with the electricity in my car. Do you think the battery will be empty? No, I need only 10% of the available energy in my battery to be used for 1 day of consumption of my home. So I have 90% left to drive around the next day. So these were my 3 takeaways: purchase price, driving range, and charging infrastructure. What has to be done next? Here you see a picture of Brussels, and the yellow dots are the areas where air quality is bad. And unfortunately, it is in these areas that we have a population in Brussels that has not the means to buy a more expensive electric car. So we have to look how to have electric vehicles also there, and that are mainly people that buy second-hand market vehicles. So often we look to the first market, and that's normal, new vehicles and so on. We first need new electric vehicles before they come on the second-hand market. But this is something we have to look in the near future, how to capture electric vehicles in the second-hand market, also how to make them available for a larger population. In the field of battery technology, that will help for the driving range. We will work on cobalt-free batteries. Cobalt is not only a dirty chemistry, there are many issues related to cobalt, but it's also a very expensive part of the battery. So if we can have rid of the cobalt in the lithium batteries, that would be nice. The liquid electrolyte we like to change to solid electrolyte to make the batteries smaller. For the same volume we can drive further. And then finally, and that has been said before, we have to work on smart charging and vehicle-to-grid applications. And by this, I like to conclude my short introduction for the panel discussion later onwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yuri. So our next panelist will be Hrvoje, please. what can we say about it from a Croatian point of view? We had Danish, Australian, Belgian, and now Croatian point, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation to this panel, and thank you all for coming. My name is Hrvoje Panđić. I work at the University of Zagreb, Faculty of Electrical Engineering and Computing. My background is generally in power systems, so I will be talking more about the life of electric vehicles within the power system as well, not only about the EVs. I wasn't certain how this will be organized, so I only prepared 2 slides with some of the punchlines that can be maybe a good conversation starters for the panel. As you all know pretty much, Croatia is not the richest country in Europe, but it's very touristical. So we have many tourists, and these tourists do not come so much during the entire year, but generally in July and August, maybe something in June or September. But generally we have a huge inflow of tourists, and they dominantly come with their vehicles, personal vehicles, from the neighboring countries, from Slovenia, from Hungary, from Austria, Germany, and so on and so on. So you can imagine that all of these countries are a little bit richer than Croatia. The more northern you go, the richer the countries are in general. So it's expected that these people will adopt EVs sooner than us living in Croatia. However, we need to have sufficient infrastructure for those people to be able to use their vehicles to come to Croatia. Here I took an example of Istria, which is a peninsula, and it's one of the more developed parts of Croatia. So generally wealthier tourists come to Istria. So you can see these are from PlugShare. It's an app for your phone. You can see the charging stations. Obviously not all the charging stations are here. You can have a charging station as a standalone facility. In that case, the distribution system operator is aware of this charging station. However, you can have a charging station within a hotel like this one, downstairs in a garage. In that case, the distribution system operator does not know that there's a charging station here. Okay? However, this charging station can be connected to an app like this and can be used by individuals from outside. The biggest question here is, how do we build sufficient infrastructure for people to come to the seaside? If they come by their car, Croatia is very long when it comes when you go from north to south. So in that case, you will definitely need to charge at least once in Croatia, maybe even 2 or 3 times if you are a little bit if you drive a little bit faster than you should. So in that sense, it's very difficult to come up with a sustainable and economically sound way of building an infrastructure that is not very costly to use, but that can pay itself off to its investors. So that's definitely one of the issues the Croatian ministry has to tackle. Generally, we are all looking to have as much as possible slow chargings, so that the charging should happen at home, even at the hotel. If you have an entire night to charge your vehicle, that's pretty good. Many of us might have EV chargers at home. It's called an outlet. So if you have a garage, you can plug in your vehicle and charge it at 3.6 kilowatts usually. So in that sense, any home can become an EV charging station for your own purposes, obviously. What I wanted to show here are the fast charging stations. This is a fast charging station in a place where you can buy a brand new Porsche, which is a very nice place. It's southwestern part of Vienna, I believe. So the dots on the right-hand side are something that we didn't have access to the charging station, obviously, but we put those numbers individually because we took pictures of what you can see here. What's important here is that at the beginning, just look at the third graph to the right, the ones with the red dots, the green circles. What you can see is at the beginning, the vehicle was was charging at around over 220 kilowatts. 220 kilowatts, a regular household in average consumes 1 kilowatt. So this is many households for just one EV. However, The thing is that after a while, so these are minutes on the x-axis, goes down rapidly. Why? Because the charging current goes down. I will not go into details why this happens, but this is just for us to understand that the fast charging station, irrespective of its power, does not consume the power, that power all the time. So that power goes down. And maybe if some of you have tried EVs and EV charging, you can see that more and more you get paid, you have to pay to charge your EV by the minute and not by the kilowatt hour, not by the energy. Because here, there is not so much energy that was charged into the vehicle, maybe, I don't know, 60 kilowatt hours altogether in the end. However, as an operator and owner of a charging station, you're interested to sell as much energy as you can. So you're looking to be at the beginning, at the left-hand side here, which you cannot be all the time if you use the fast charging stations. So they make a lot of stress to the distribution system. However, there's not so much energy as the owner would like, because you have to charge more if you sell less energy. So the question is if this is all sustainable or not. And this is, I started talking about Istria. This is just to show from the known charging stations, some of them in Istria, they're connected to certain substations, distribution level substations. And the graphs to the right show in which month most energy is sold on those charging stations. As you can see, what is dominant here is July. Fontana, which is in the upper right corner, it has a lot of energy being sold in January and February as well. However, this is the biggest challenge for Croatian distribution system operator dominantly, is how to preserve the system during the summer when there's a peak load anyway, and a lot of tourists adding to this peak load with their electric vehicles. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hrvoje. And last, but the biggest, Ulrich, coming from a country with serious EV market and also very serious automotive industry, Germany. Please.
Yes, thank you, Nevin. Welcome, dear CAETS colleagues. So I want to make some comments on bidirectional power flow of EV. When I personally started my research work on EV in the late 70s, beginning of the 80s, we made the same experience as Moby did. So our goal was to keep the electric vehicle running for 40 or 50 kilometers without the thermal death of power electronics or the electrical machine and so on. And yes, we were successful sometimes, so the cars are reliable, they work, have a higher range. And the PhD students of today, they assume, they do not question the fact that the electric vehicle will be an essential part of the traffic system, and they care about the question of how to integrate dozens of millions of electric vehicles into the existing or future energy system, using new technologies, using also new market models like blockchain and so on. So the challenges have changed. So this is the result of a study we did at the Research Institute for Energy Economy in Munich. These numbers addressing the German energy system. So in the year 2020, we had less than 1 million, several hundred thousands of electric vehicles. In 2022, 1 million. And assuming a battery capacity of 50 kilowatt hours per vehicle, this sums up to 50 gigawatt hours. So in the year 2030, so this is only in 7 years, we hope to have 15 million electric vehicles, and the corresponding storage capacity then summing up to 750 gigawatt hours. And in 2050, 40 million, which is more or less 100% of the fleet. and 2,000 gigawatt hours of storage capacity on the road, on wheels. Just to see, I have to check whether this appears in this slide. Yes. As a reference point, today's stationary energy storage and electricity storage in Germany is 40 gigawatt hours. We just heard another number for Denmark, 15 gigawatt hours, in Germany 40 gigawatt hours. A number more or less constant over the last decades, because it's not possible to further increase the capacity of pumped hydro storage in Germany. And 40 gigawatt hours is, as an average value, the energy consumption of 35 minutes in Germany. So the storage capacity is quite low. And since we do not have a real generation problem, looking at the huge amount of renewable energy which we expect in Germany in the next 10 or 20 years, we have a distribution problem. So over time and over space, how to distribute the generation from renewables and the need from the electric vehicles. So given or assuming these numbers, which are quite a challenge, what could we do with this lots of storage capacity? And in another study, together with industrial partners, we made a simulation of possible applications. I won't go into details, maybe in the discussion a little later. So we have some applications vehicle to home, so increased self-consumption for those who have a PV system, for instance, or emergency power supply in a private home could be another application. The provision of energy from between vehicles, or vehicles to devices, or vehicle to business, like peak shaving, which is a big cost factor in future. Spot market trading, I mentioned the blockchain model, for instance. Then CO2 optimized charging in comparison to tariff optimized charging, local grid service, and so on, many others. So these were the ones identified as the potential most interesting applications. So quite a lot of them. And in another model, other simulation, we calculated the effects of bidirectional power flow on the European energy system in the year 2040. And just to give you four numbers, so this is for Europe in total, we assume that we can reduce the capacity of stationary thermal power plants by more than 30 gigawatts, or 30 nuclear plants, or big coal power plants. We can reduce the need for stationary power energy storage by 60 gigawatt hours. So this is more than the capacity we have in Germany installed today. We can install an extra 300 gigawatt of photovoltaics, because now with this storage effect, we have the capacity of integrating more PV into the system. And this is a contribution to reduce the energy system costs of the system Europe by 2 to 3%, which at the first sight sounds not so much, but it corresponds to about 7 billion euro per year, which is quite a lot of money we can use for other interesting things. Okay, first impression on bidirectional flow. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. More or less, that's a question of smartness of the system. Let's imagine the following situation. Everybody has electric car. Everybody comes home at the same time. Everybody has a 7 kilowatt charger at home. And everybody plugs in at the same time. That would suck approximately double of the installed capacity of a typical country. It's not feasible. It will not happen in reality because we don't come home at the same time. We don't have to charge every day, but we still need to have smart chargers. What we can see now is that there is a good business model for building fast chargers on highways. There is money in that. Tesla has shown the way, but now others are coming to the market. But what I don't see is smart charging. I see it only in Denmark. Danish people now walk around with their apps, and they can show me how much money they saved on charging their EVs only in the hours when there was a lot of wind. But you can't do it anywhere else. We have flat tariffs or maybe two tariff systems. But what we need is actually having dynamic tariffs on a 15 minutes basis so our cars can charge when there is a lot of wind and solar in the system. I would like to hear your take, why it doesn't happen, when it's going to happen, and how can we build this business model. Maybe Yuri, Hrvoje, I don't know, who starts?
Well, I heard my name first, so but I fully agree. We indeed need the financial incentives to do so. If you have very simple tariffs for at home, then yeah, you're not incentivized to charge at the right moment. I see in Belgium now smart charging coming in the first instance at places where people have already solar panels, because then they can combine their solar energy with charging their electric vehicle. They don't have to bring it back to the grid, because there are some price incentives already. The next step in Belgium is the capacity tariff. So if you exceed a higher power demand on the grid, you have to pay more, not only based on energy prices, but also on power prices. And that will also stimulate the introduction of smart charging. But we need more, and we need to have the possibility to play on the electricity market in the near future.
I can add, there's certainly a company in Australia which actually enables you to buy as the wholesale price fluctuates. So they give you a put through, if you like, so that they're buying at the wholesale price and sell it to you. So certainly where you have regular peaks and troughs, like in the middle of the day on a sunny day in Australia, you can choose to be buying your electricity. So there are opportunities to increase that level of tariff management. Scripps used to do it kind of slightly the other way around. I love it. They used to have electric cars were able to charge for free in Scripps, the big part of University of San Diego, in their car park during the day, on the understanding that Scripps could use that electricity in the early afternoon when everyone came back to work from lunch, cranked up the air conditioning because it was so hot outside, and they could use those cars in a vehicle back to grid sort of or mini grid situation. But they promised to refill the car by the afternoon when that massive massive peak had dissipated and come back to normal. So it's interesting how behavior management, it comes back to behavior management, doesn't it? How you incentivize and, carrot and stick, how you make it difficult to do it when you don't want them to, and how you incentivize them to do it when you do.
Yeah, thank you. I would only add that, technically that's highly doable. That's not a problem, obviously. What's the problem is that first there are some prerequisites. You need smart metering systems to be able to know at which point in time you consumed how much electricity. This can also be kind of overcome even if the distribution system operator hasn't yet installed a smart meter in your home. This can be overcome with an additional smart meter to be installed by your supplier or your aggregator or something like that. However, the price of electricity, when you pay the electricity bill, you have multiple things that you pay for. Energy is just one of them. The other one is the network fee, one for distribution, one for transmission network. Other one is renewables fee, where you put money to subsidize renewables, and that fee is generally the same throughout the day, at least in Croatia and some other countries, as far as I know. So it's not. First thing is that the suppliers need to have something that's called real-time pricing or something like that. However, that only affects a portion of your bill. We need action from the distribution and transmission system operators to let us know how is their network doing, at least in our part of the country. So sometimes they would like us to consume more, sometimes they would like us to consume less, and they should communicate that with us using these tariffs, which shouldn't be just a two-tariff system, which is probably 60 years old in Croatia.
Yeah, maybe Ulrich wants to comment, but before Ulrich, I would like to comment to this Hrvoje's position, or another sub-question. Is it time that we move to pay the grid cost based on the peak power and not converted to kilowatt hour? Because for smart energy systems, we will need that. We don't want to use grid too much, so people will have to pay the grid cost based on the grid cost and not based on some recalculation.
I think that will be difficult because of a couple of reasons. First, all consumers over 22 kilowatts in Croatia pay the peak power cost, monthly cost. So this hotel pays peak load costs. I at home, I don't pay peak load cost because I'm, I don't know, 6 kilowatts or something like that. Second, when you buy your connection at the first time when you're building a house, for instance, you pay something like 200 euros per kilowatt. And I assume that it would be difficult to double charge this. That's how people would see it, I believe. So that's a difficult question, but I think everything can be settled if people who own EVs and charge them at home at relatively high powers. These are usually relatively, early adopters or wealthier people or people who like green energy and things like that. So in that sense, they will probably have rooftop PVs. However, the problem here is that now I'm here at a meeting. Let's assume it's a sunny day outside, which is not. So my PVs are producing something that's being put into the grid because there's no one home, just the refrigerator consuming a little bit, and that's it. Once I get home at around 6 or 7 p.m., it's going to be dark outside. And I'm going to take a lot of electricity from the grid. So how to deal with that would be to somehow incentivize people to have local batteries or some storage devices, if nothing. And how do we do that? Again, monetarily, we can introduce at least a third tariff, which is going to be the most expensive one, from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. or something like that.
Ulrich?
Okay, many things, of course, have already been said. Just two more aspects. So I already mentioned that energy is not the problem. So 1 million electric cars will need about 2 terawatt hours. Germany nowadays consumes 600 terawatt hours. So even a few million electric cars won't change too much. We have that power problem and how to create incentives for not charging all at the same time. It's flexibility. So being more flexible, not expecting that after plugging in your car, after 2 or 3 hours, it will be fully tanked, but you should be flexible, even to the point I showed this as one point in my slide, vehicle to vehicle. You could offer the capacity of your electric car for another electric car. So this is maybe the maximum of flexibility you can sell. But well, flexibility has to pay. So this is the main incentive, and of course, all of you already commented the grid costs and the power costs and so on. And in addition, new marketplaces. I already mentioned the blockchain or flexibility platforms, which I personally believe will play a big role. So not the energy markets, the terawatt hours, but the kilowatt and the megawatt, and also on a private basis. So by peer-to-peer. Yeah. So I think if we look at the future, energy market future means 10 years or so quite nearby, we will have such platforms, and everybody is an energy and power trader.
This summer, Tesla chargers in Croatia were offering free electricity during the day and during the night because they are using renewable electricity, and they were only charging in the afternoon when electricity is expensive and there is not enough renewable. We spend most of our days, solar days, at work. So why not having solar panels at work and charging places at work, which would be smart chargers? Electricity will most probably be cheap or free of charge during the day because there will be excess solar everywhere. We can see it from Netherlands. They already reached the duck curve point where most of daily electricity in summer is solar. So I think that it might be better to have offices offering as nice perks to its employees charging spots with solar charging than at home, because I agree what Haro has said, that home is not where we are when there is solar energy. Can you comment on that? Is it the right way to go to involve our working places into the process? Anyone? Yeah.
In theory, yes, but when you consider how many working places are tall tower blocks, for example, the capacity to put solar panels on is difficult. And I had kind of had a question that's attached to that for the other members of the panel. How do you manage in countries where you have a large amount of apartment living to, as a sort of social justice thing, the opportunity for people to participate in the renewables market when they live in environments which are difficult to put solar panels on as an individual, because either you're a renter or you have an apartment in a larger block and you need everybody to agree to make the investment?
Yes, who is... Yeah, Henrik.
Maybe the first question. For me, it's not a competition, solar panels at home or solar panels at work. We need all the roofs and so on. We need the surface that is there
all
to put the PV. And of course, it was in one of my slides. It's nice when I am at my university in Brussels that there are solar panels there and I can make use of that electricity. And I think also from an employee point of view, in the future it can be an attractive point to attract good work labor and to give that as a benefit. And there are a lot of benefits when you go to a certain company. Well, in my company you can charge free of charge your electric vehicle. So that I think will play a role in the future. Concerning our apartments, indeed, and it's a little bit broader even than that. I have a team that is working on energy communities, sustainable energy communities, we call it. It's not only apartments, but it's also 10, 20, 50 houses together that forms an energy community, and then they have a larger entity to either play on the electricity market, but also to do all the services to all the individual persons. Because as an individual, if I'm living in a home or in an apartment, sometimes I don't see the wood within the trees. How do you say that in English? Something like that. So yeah, to make it life easy for the people, I think energy communities can have a role there.
Ulrich?
Yes, I would say the answer to your question is yes. Very important that business also engages in this point. And there's one car producer in Munich which has a big parking house with lots of wallet parking places, about 50 or 60. The number is increasing. Plus a stationary battery in the parking house, plus a PV system. So a maximum of flexibility. So making a charging management between about 50 cars. The users of the cars, they have a very good prognosis of their stay. When will they arrive? When will they go? So this is quite reliable, more reliable than in a public parking house. And the combination of flexible cars, of battery and PV is ideal. Yeah.
Regarding the high-risers and roofs, maybe answer to Catherine, if we have energy communities or exchange of energy or just buying energy from somewhere, you can use somebody else's roof in order to cover that need. So there are technical solutions. It doesn't have to be on the roof of high-rise.
It just depends on the proportion of low-rise with roofs to high-rise with...
But it could also be parking places which can be covered, or shopping centers. There is, we did calculation for Croatia and came out with that using the roofs we can produce 1/3 of electricity needed. There is plenty of roofs, and then there is plenty of other space. So, but the crucial thing, I think, that every single parking place should have a smart charger. This is critical. But let's go to another subject. I'm always fascinated by French going to vacations. They clog highways for 3 days, they don't move anywhere, and let's imagine that all these cars are electric. How are we going to supply that electricity? Hrvoje talked a little bit about Istria. I don't know if you have done calculations. We did some, and it doesn't look that bad. We came out with a very simple calculation that we need around 10 megawatt of chargers on each petrol station to cover the peak of cars. This is without trucks. We didn't take into account trucks. I don't know if you came to another solution, but French would need much more, because they really, everybody goes vacation same day. I think that if we cannot do it technically, we should just charge them in order that they spread in maybe 1 week. Charge, yes. Who wants to comment on this? How to get French to the seaside?
Yeah, obviously it's this is not first such type of a problem. We charge more to the tourists that want to have their vacations in late July and early August. So now we have some people coming in October even. I mean, there's no obvious solution. Somehow you need to have this acting as gas stations, so people can stay, for short amounts of time, for maybe up to 7 minutes or something like that per vehicle. There are a couple of places in Croatia where are very close to the highways, near Zadar and Otočac and other ones, where you have off highway charging stations that have maybe 10 or 12 high-speed chargers. And still this year I saw many people waiting. There were long waiting lines. We are not sure how to deal with that, because the problem is that when you're waiting to be charged, there's nothing for you to do. So maybe an idea would be to have huge malls or something like enjoyment centers or something like that, where people can actually do something while their vehicles are charging, because in the middle of nowhere, you don't feel like it's pulling over and doing nothing for half an hour waiting to get to the line and then charging your vehicle. I'm not sure what is the solution there.
Yeah, Otočac is a very difficult place. I know, because I always charge there. But a solution is to have few hundred charging spots at a certain time. We calculated you need around 200 chargers per petrol station, each petrol station, and they come every 30 kilometers or something like that. But there should also be petrol stations with something to offer a little bit more than the one in Otočac.
Exactly.
That one is really bad, and you can't really avoid it because there is far space between chargers in the Lika mountain. Yes.
So yeah, maybe instead of subsidizing EVs, we should subsidize infrastructure which is necessary, but not necessarily economic for the investors.
Yes, of course we need to subsidize chargers, especially at the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there is the dilemma that we want electric vehicles driving 1,000 kilometers, so we can do our trip over one day and we charge during the night, while for normal use we drive only 40 kilometers a day average, something like that, depending on the country. So we have very huge batteries in our cars, in fact only to go on holidays. But yeah, from mental point of view, from thinking, yeah, we need that. That's the reason why we have long driving ranges. Concerning the return of investment on the charging infrastructure, I'm wondering if heavy duty will be there a solution. Well, you can see it as a next issue or a next challenge when all the trucks are electric. So people think that hydrogen will be the future for trucks. I have some doubts if I see the evolution of the battery technology further improving. I think 50% of the trucks they can drive already electric. But okay, for longer distance they will also need charging infrastructure on the highway. And these trucks are not traveling only during holidays. They're traveling the whole year through. So then that infrastructure, if we can combine fast charging for trucks and passenger cars, which is another challenge, then the return on investment maybe will be there.
Yeah, Ulrich.
Maybe we can say it in the positive way. Maybe electric vehicle is the game changer with this problem. Nowadays, the French people, many German people are not afraid of coming to a congestion and standing on the autobahn for hours. They expect that, yeah. And this is normal, and it's not really a problem. It's only time, lost time, and time consumption. But well, it partly belongs to traveling. And it's not a technical problem because at the next gas station they get their gasoline after waiting 15 minutes or so. But this could be an EV could be an educational manner because it's not solvable as easy as gasoline tanking. And maybe this will lead to a sort of a paradigm change how to use a car, and well, makes sense also in the case of time saving and well, more peaceful start into a holiday.
Another topic, grid stabilization, ancillary services. We are going to have lots of roof PV on low voltage. And at certain point, we're going to have excess of this PV energy being exported through the transformation up to the higher level, which means that the lower level grid will stay without enough reactive power and unstable. Can we use inverters which are on the cars to do grid forming production of reactive power, or will the inverters from PVs be enough? What is your take, if anybody thought about this issue? Yeah.
Well, not the focus of my research work, but I'm a little bit familiar with the topic. Normally, of course, the system who causes the default should provide the reactive power, and this is the converter of PV, and technically this is not a problem at all. But of course, especially elder system may not be able to do this. So I think it would be a good idea if the power electronic in electric vehicles also could do this, could deliver this service, which is technically not really a challenge.
Maybe.
Yeah, there's no technical challenges there. issue is not only the reactive power, it's the active as well. If you at certain points in time produce a lot of electricity, the voltage goes up. If you consume a lot in the evening, the voltage goes down, and it's difficult for the distribution network to handle such oscillations in voltage, which is why in those cases the DSO might need to purchase some kind of ancillary services. However, the question is, where does it get money to purchase such services? So that's why usually the DSOs are very cautious when it comes to connecting new facilities, especially high power facilities such as high-speed charging stations and so on, that only operate during relatively limited amounts of time at this point yet, because still we don't have so many EVs.
Okay, so if there are any questions from audience, I'm now opening floor for questions. I still have some questions, but yes, there is 2 or 3, please, yes, start. Yeah.
Yes. Very nice. I learned quite a bit from your discussions, but I like to...
Is the microphone working?
I like to read to you from a report that Toyota put together. A report that Toyota has put together. You may have already seen that report, but in New York Times, there is a piece I saw. It says that we have electric vehicles. Also, we have electric vehicles like hybrid, plug-in or rechargeable by driving and braking. Now, the rocks minerals that you need, all of them, they need minerals. Now, the computations that the Toyota people did, that for one long-range electric vehicle, the amount of minerals you need would be enough for either 6 plug-in hybrids or 90 of the type of hybrid that can be plugged in for a recharge. Now, the overall carbon reduction of those 90 hybrids, that unpluggable, over their lifetimes is 37 times as much as a single battery electric vehicle. Now, Toyota maybe have the report self-interest because, they did not, they have this rechargeable, the Prius type. But it has been validated, these computations by the people, knowledgeable people. Now, also, I feel that some of the minerals that come from some countries that have problematic, the working conditions, etc. So, if we keep that in mind, and we see another fact that it says, computations, so electric vehicles have to travel between 28,000 and 68,000 miles before they have an emissions advantage over similarly sized and equipped internal combustion engines or mobiles, according to some of the people that they verified the Toyota report. So that may take 10 years or more if the EV isn't driven much. So I want to hear your comments. I can see that, that we are all, we need electric vehicles, we need to decarbonize. But can you comment on this?
Well, I hope I heard you well enough. I'm sure panelists will have good answers, but I can also comment a bit on that. All the materials we need for the transition from now till the end of century is less than the materials fossil fuel used in only one single year. So we are talking about minuscule amounts of materials. Of course, bigger amounts than we use now, But most of materials, it's only a question of possible bottlenecks in the second half of this decade, but there are not really limits to the amounts of materials that we need. We will need to recycle them, but they will be recycled because they're expensive. So I don't really see that as a problem. Regarding the electric car becoming more sustainable than IC engine car after a certain number of kilometers, that depends very much on the context. If you used fossil fuels to produce the electric car, of course this is longer. But we are moving very quickly to renewables, so this will not be an issue at all in 10 years' time when most of power and energy will anyway be renewable. So this is a temporary question, but we need to reduce carbon emissions for 100%, and hybrids cannot deliver that. So they're not solution. They may be a nice marketing tool for people who are not feeling too comfortable to switch to electric vehicles now, but in the long run, we will all be driving electric cars happily ever after. Yuri.
Yes, indeed. When I see this kind of information in the public domain, I always try to figure out where does it come from. And there is a lot of lobbying behind the scenes. There are car industries that are, let's say, lagging behind in the development of electric vehicles and putting a lot of effort in hybrids. And of course, it's easy to say a hybrid car needs less battery than a full battery electric car. That's true. All the rest is wrong. I have several PhD students. I had several PhD students, and I still have several PhD students doing for 4 years research to calculate the environmental impact of electric vehicles and compare it with other vehicle technology. Some people, they do it in 3 minutes on a little white paper in their kitchen, and they think they can do a calculation, what is the CO2 impact of a vehicle. It's not that easy. Life cycle assessment is a science as such, and you need the skills to do that. And when you go deeper into the details behind calculations of CO2 emissions, then you can easily find where are the wrong assumptions in the wrong calculations. Take, for instance, production of petrol or diesel. Petrol and diesel need to be refined out of crude oil. The amount of CO2 emissions to produce petrol or diesel is almost the same in order of magnitude as the amount of CO2 emissions to produce electricity. Often this is not taken into account. They only look to tailpipe emissions for petrol and diesel cars. This is just one example. If you do these calculations in Belgian situation, then electric vehicles are consuming 3 to 4 times less CO2 emissions today. That is not including the renewable energy that is coming into our electricity system the coming years. So every year when I buy an electric car today, tomorrow it will be cleaner because tomorrow there is more solar. The day after tomorrow it will be even more cleaner because there is more wind. So, and then the other comparison at European level, if you take the electricity mix in Europe, and the same is valid for the USA, for instance, then today the electric vehicles are consuming half of the CO2 emissions, driving the same distance as a petrol car on a full life of the vehicle. These calculations can be backed up by a lot of scientific reports I can provide you if you need it.
If no comments from panelists, there was one question there, and then here.
Goran Krajacic, University of Zagreb. I have a question for Professor Wagner. You are coming from the heart of German automotive industry, and you said you are in research for electric vehicles for 40 years. So I have one question that is worrying me. So because I think that you were doing the best cars in the world. I don't want to offend colleagues from Japan, you know, but so why you didn't? Why you're not leading this electromobility? Because 15 years ago we were saying the electric cars are coming. 10 years ago we were showing that the electric vehicles are really necessary and they will help decarbonization. And then What is wrong with the, let's say, German car industry? Why you are not leading it, this electromobility? Was it because engineers said it was not feasible to do it, because of the managers that said we don't need it, or politicians didn't want it? Do you have answer? If you don't have this answer, okay, I have easy question for you. Then when you show that you will put 300 gigawatts in electric grid in Germany until 2040, I know that the German has planned to build the 200 gigawatts until 2030. So is this 300 additional to this 200, or it is additional to current level of installed PV?
Okay, last question first, because this is the easier one. It's a difference between two scenarios, one with direct bidirectional power flow and one without. So it's a difference between these two scenarios. Yes, on your first question, very difficult, quite difficult, because not only the car producer in Munich, but almost all the others, they were active since the 70s. So they tried many things, battery cars and also hydrogen fuel cell driven cars. And of course, it's always the question, the balance between what is technically possible and what does the user want to have. And the third column, of course, is politics. Is there a subsidy for introducing a new technology? What about the infrastructure construction, which is especially in the case of EV a presumption before we can enter in this technology. So maybe the car producers do not always have the biggest impulse or moment to drive a new technology, but they always have a very good picture of what is interesting for the next 2, 3, 4 years. What is the request of the customer? And of course, it could be much more. And the biggest problem I see is that almost all car producers have their focus on big cars. I just visited the international automobile market in Munich 2 or 3 weeks ago, and very boring, I have to say. Almost all the cars electric. So worst case was a hybrid car, 1 or 2, but they were a little ashamed. And no ICE car, so all electric cars. And well, wherever you went, same size. So a limousine with 4 doors, 5 seats, 4 meters 50 long, 500 horsepower, 50,000 euro. So the same thing. And well, a gap I see is in smaller cars, and this is something where, well, I think our automotive industry could invest much, or could invest more. So having a bigger focus on smaller cars. Of course, we all know what the incentive is for bigger cars, because the added value for the company is bigger, and they can try well, new technology and so on. But well, I'm not sure whether this is the complete answer to your very complicated and partly psychological question. This is what I can answer to your question.
Thank you. We have another question here, and another there, and another there. Okay.
Yeah, Al Romick from the U.S. National Academy. Just thinking about the developed world period, I would submit that not all places are equal. For example, the population density of Europe is very different than the US or Canada or Australia. And I know that, for example, having one home in the Intermountain West, 1/3 the size of Europe with less than 10 million people. You get off of the main highways, you'll see a sign that says next services, meaning gasoline, 220 miles. So I don't know how in regions like, once you're out of the southern belt of Canada, Australia, or intermountain regions of the West or the Midwest of the US, where the population density is so low, how you can ever fully electrify the fleet there. Maybe hybrids, but there's just not going to be the capital capacity to install grid charging stations in those very remote areas.
This is excellent question, but actually it's much easier to deliver electricity in outback than petrol.
People won't pay for it, not when there's not enough customers.
No, because you have electricity everywhere. Come on. How many of those homes don't have electricity?
The homes can be 100 miles apart.
Okay. So you can drive 100 miles between two homes. I mean, electricity there is everywhere. Petrol is somewhere, I remember nearly got stuck in Wyoming once because they burned one petrol station which was in between, and then I had to drive 200 miles. But there was thousands of houses on the way where I could charge my car.
As the other very non-dense country, the most non-dense country, yeah, you're right. We actually are getting a good uptake in regional areas where people who have homes, they can refill their cars with their electricity without having to drive hundreds of miles to actually go and fill up with gas. So we're actually finding that I don't know so much about those driving through. That's more a highway issue, and those are also being dealt with by government infrastructure investment. But in terms of the people living in those regions, they're finding it better because, yes, they do all have electricity. And in fact, the electricity supply is now nearer their homes because it's coming from the remote areas where the large PV farms are in particular. And so in terms of the grid's actually reversing, where we had big power stations close to cities, big fat grid coming into cities, remote people were really hard done by. It's actually reversing the density of energy out in remote areas is higher now than it ever has been. So in terms of actually what we're seeing on the ground, we are seeing a good uptake in regional areas because people feel more in control because they can fill their car themselves as opposed to hoping that Joe Blow down the road actually has enough gas.
Not if you're traveling through.
Yeah, people don't tend to travel through really remote areas. If they do on highways, and highways have infrastructure being built all the time now in Australia, but it's a bit different to the US where we're even more remote, more dispersed, but ironically then we're more concentrated because we grow along highways.
How would you drive from Brisbane to Alice Springs from Washington, for example?
Oh, I have colleagues who do those kind of journeys. You wouldn't drive through the middle of the outback anyway. Very few people, even if they have four-wheel drives, would ever attempt to trip like that without actually going down the highway and across on the next highway. It's just not practical in Australia because we don't have the road infrastructure in the first place. So again, ironically, it's actually easier in some ways than trying to put gasoline, trucking it out, and the emission costs of actually trucking the gasoline out to a remote petrol station compared to delivering electricity to that same point for somebody to charge their car. So it's different in the US where you have a lot more people driving through a lot more remote areas, but ours are very highway driven, very trunk road driven.
So 200 miles is not a problem, on every petrol station you will have chargers because petrol stations, they need electricity in order to pump fuel. And because it's expensive to bring electricity to petrol station, you usually bring them on medium voltage, which means you have plenty of excess capacity you can use for chargers. So on petrol stations you will have a solution. In homes you will have a solution. So I don't really see a problem, not even in Africa. You will have PV on the roof and cars will be charged with PV. Anybody in the panel want to comment this remote case? No? Then we had a question there, and then we had a question here, and then again there. Okay. Please.
Yep. Raul from Rimac Technology. I actually have two questions. The first one is related other mobility models. Have we considered those into the corrections or into the predictions that we're doing into the energy requirements? For example, co-ownership of vehicles, large companies with large fleets of electric vehicles instead of single ownership, because I see in younger generations driving is more of a nuisance than actually a pleasurable thing. Yeah, that's my first question. And the second question, I would like to address the question actually from the gentleman here, because I think maybe for the technical issues, it wasn't very clear. His question was regarding the minerals that are used on battery production, not really the CO2 emissions that we're dealing with. How are we taking into consideration the ecological and human impacts from this mineral?
Okay, this question is coming from these guys making 2 million euros cars in Zagreb. Anybody wants to answer this question from the panel? Well, the first one, yes, young people will probably buy cars later, and they will prefer some kind of sharing and using transport as services. So we are moving into fleets, and hopefully you guys will develop cars with drive on their own. So we will not really. I don't think we will want to own a car once the insurance is taken over by the car production companies, and that will happen at the level 3. So it's very soon happening, and then after that, I think ownership is something that will start to fall quickly. Yuri, maybe on the second question?
Yes, indeed, on the second question, but you already mentioned even that the availability of material, we don't think there will be an issue. As long as we recycle the batteries, that's very important. And also the recycling has also an impact to reduce the impact on the environmental quality of electric vehicles. When you do life cycle assessment, you have indeed the CO2 emissions, impact on climate change, and you have many other impact categories. If you select all these impact categories, you can find one, and that is human toxicity. On human toxicity, electric vehicles are worse than petrol vehicles. That's a fact, a scientific fact when you do the calculation. However, the uncertainty on the results of human toxicity is very large. So if you do life cycle assessment, it's very crucial to include uncertainty in your analysis, to not show only one result, but to show a variety of results. If you take all these impact categories, climate change, ecotoxicity, human toxicity, resource depletion, acid rain, and so on, you can combine these impacts and you can calculate finally a single score. So a single scoring is including all the different impact categories. Well, if you take the single score, then electric vehicles are much better than petrol or diesel cars. So, and that single score is including that human toxicity where in original numbers electric vehicles were worse. Is that clear, that answer? It's a little bit complex, but I can send you some scientific papers on that if you want.
Axel?
Yes, thank you. Flow batteries, like vanadium flow batteries, received a great deal of attention as means of storing larger quantities of electricity. Can you comment from the perspective of the mobility sector regarding the development of flow batteries? Does it make sense there, or is it really for other sectors, if anywhere?
Well, that would probably be better for the next panel on batteries. But what I can say is that this is mainly developed for stationary use, but there will be a big barrier to that because lithium batteries will have second life in stationary use. So all these car batteries can be used for another 10 years as stationary batteries. There will be a huge amount of them before you need to recycle them. So I'm not sure about the market for flow batteries then, but maybe Ulrich.
Yeah, maybe I can add one aspect. So I agree that flow batteries will have their future in stationary application. We have made some experience with flow batteries in electric vehicles so many years ago, but they were quite, unsafe. So if you look on the flow battery, it has lots of tubes and pumps and so on, which is not very convenient for car, for mobile application. And of course, flow batteries have made an interesting development in the last 10 or 20 years so, and the efficiency is much higher, so the energy density is better. But well, I agree that this is much more interesting or important for stationary application.
We have one question there, and then another one there. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Rob Crawhall with the Canadian Academy of Engineering. I wasn't originally going to get into non-urban issues. I have a question about urban, but while we're at it, I happen to sit on the national standards body for distribution networks. So in Canada, you have to think of this as urban, rural, remote, north, and far north. So the north and far north, we're still trying to get them off of diesel generators for the electricity. So there is no grid, there is no network. And as we've seen this last summer, there's a lot of adverse weather conditions. So we still deal with about a 50% drop in distance capacity during the winter because of using the batteries for heat within the car, consequences of losing the battery when you're in a car on a pass-through drive when it's minus 20, minus 30, minus 40 with wind chill is actually fairly serious. So the range anxiety is a bit different. And we've seen a lot of part of adaptation to bad weather conditions, whether they be forest fires, which have flattened a couple of cities in Western Canada this year, or floods as happened in BC, or where you have to evacuate a whole town. You know, they're not lining up because it's French holiday weekend, it's because there's a forest fire coming through and you have to get away from it. A lot of issues with whether or not you want to be actually driving your pickup truck with a gas engine that'll get out, or whether you'll be driving an electric vehicle. And that's just sort of reality of the discussion. The main problem we have in the standards body is that in Canada, each province has its electrical utility or series of electrical utilities, which are obliged by law to provide the lowest possible tariff to the user community. And one of the consequences of that is they haven't been renewing the infrastructure, such as the last distribution transformers before you get to the houses. And so they're all running near capacity. And they don't have a mechanism to get ahead of the current curve. So we're seeing electric vehicles coming mostly into affluent neighborhoods, but there's a whole series of problems of infrastructure up to those affluent neighborhoods that really cannot take the capacity. And so they need to be able to change it faster than the electric vehicles are coming in. And we're seeing a lot of mandates for 2030, 2035, which is going to drive the rate of adoption of electric vehicles much more quickly than the utilities have planned on updating mostly the transformers. So, you talked at the beginning about integrating the systems, and we are looking at microgrids and mini-grids, but there is a fundamental problem with getting through the legal structures that contain the utilities for them to be able to move quickly enough to keep up with the EV adoption. So I don't know if that's a European problem, if your utilities are a lot more flexible or forward-looking than the Canadian utilities, but just getting the electricity to where it's needed is going to be a problem. Thank you.
Thank you. You have just redefined the remoteness very much, so that you are talking about 0.001% of global population. And I admit that in northern Canada, Nunavut and Northwest Territories, there may be a problem because you don't have solar energy, and if there is no wind, and this may be the case inside, then you need to use diesel generators. But this is a really, really marginal case, and I agree that we might not have solutions for such cases, but most of remote places can produce electricity from PV panels. Most of global population, even non-electrified, live in areas where PV panels are a solution, or they are grid connected, so there is electricity in a much more dense sense than there is fuel available. So yes, I agree, you have managed to find the case where I don't have answer yet, but I will think about it. But this is a really minor issue on a global scale. So we will leave you your petrol cars or diesel cars. The issue of batteries losing mileage, yes, this is a known issue. And for minus 50 degrees, that's a major problem. I don't know how to solve that problem apart from keeping your car connected to the grid most of the time when you're parked in the night, when the temperatures are really low. But in Norway, okay, temperatures don't go that low, but it works very well. Now they have around 30% of electric cars on the road. 90% of the market is electric cars. It works well. In Sweden, which gets much colder, it seems it's working quite well. You lose maybe 30% range, but it is still quite feasible. I don't know, what do you want to comment on this very remote case? Yeah. Okay. Then we had the question there.
Thanks. Something that I saw in the news 6 months or so ago was this idea of having portable battery packs for electric vehicles. So the idea is very similar to what you do when you fill up the gas tank in your grill. You know, you go get some propane at the gas station, you drop it off, and you pick up a new one. Can you comment on whether that's a realistic thing for electric vehicles? Can you really swap battery packs in and out like that? Is that really going to happen?
Well, my solution when I was driving electric car in areas without chargers, and Balkans 10 years ago was completely without chargers, was simple. I would just knock on the door of a next nice lady and have a coffee with her while charging my car. So I don't really see a need for extra battery. But regarding the exchange of batteries, this is a business model that failed in several cases. Maybe somebody will develop it. It makes sense for two-wheelers when you have a small number of cells, because then the battery management system is not such a crucial part of your car. But if you're exchanging batteries for which have many cells, you also have to exchange the computer or all the memory about how the cells were used, and this is quite complicated, I would say.
That's called battery swapping stations, I think. So yeah, first time it failed, it was a long time ago by an Israeli company. Yeah, Better Place. And then there was Tesla. They put a battery swapping station halfway from San Francisco to LA. However, the cost of replacing the battery was, I believe, $50 to $70, which is very expensive for American terms. So I have a feeling they wanted it to fail for some reason. It's a very big investment to build a swapping station. Today, you have swapping stations on the highways from Beijing to Shanghai, by a company called NIO, which is a Chinese-based company. And I produce actually really nice EVs, very good. I would say that in 99% of the cases you don't need that. You wouldn't use that in a city. Another problem that we had a project that had something to do with battery swapping stations. And we had a questionnaire for people in Croatia and outside of Croatia. And there's a couple of thousand people who responded to the questionnaire. And one of the biggest problem was, how do I know that I will get a good battery? Because my battery is great, I took a good care of that, and I don't believe that the battery they gave me is good. So if we are to have something like that for electric vehicles, or for four-wheel vehicles, it would make sense maybe if you go from Zagreb all the way to Dubrovnik, and you replace your battery halfway. You spend your time in Dubrovnik, and you're probably gonna take your car back to Zagreb. And then you can pick your own battery on the way back. I think that's the only thing that kind of makes sense for battery swapping stations kind of in Europe. Everything above that, I don't think. Even this case is a little bit far-fetched, let's be honest. And standardization is another major issue because none of the cars have the same access to the batteries. They don't have the same batteries. They don't have the same packs, the same models, the same voltage levels, or anything like that.
I think discussion is getting really hot, but we have to draw this panel to the end. So I would like to ask panelists to give their last thought if they have any. We said it all. Okay. If no last thoughts, then I would like to close this panel. Thank you very much. And we now have a coffee break, so we can recharge our brain with some caffeine battery. And we meet again here in half an hour. Thank you.